For 39 years, Emmanuel Lewis kept Michael Jackson's most devastating secret. The child actor who grew up alongside the king of pop witnessed the exact moment Michael Jackson stopped being a person and became a prisoner of his own fame. What Emmanuel is about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about Michael Jackson's final years. This isn't just another Michael Jackson story. This is the truth about what fame really cost the boy from Gary, Indiana, told by the only person who knew him before the world claimed him. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. on June 25th, 2009. Emmanuel Lewis had been asleep in his modest Atlanta home when Michael Jackson's voice, slurred and barely recognizable, came through the receiver. "Emmanuel, I can't do this anymore. I just wanted to hear your voice one more time." Those would be the last words Emmanuel ever heard from his childhood friend, just hours before the world lost the king of pop forever. If stories like this move you as much as they move me, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really happened to Michael in those final years. Now let's dive into Emmanuel's incredible revelation. But this story doesn't begin with that haunting phone call. It begins 37 years earlier in 1972, when two child stars met for the first time at a television studio in Burbank, California, and one of them was already carrying secrets too heavy for any child to bear. Emmanuel Lewis was only 8 years old when he first encountered 14-year-old Michael Jackson backstage at the Carol Burnett Show. The Jackson 5 had just finished their sound check, and while his brothers were talking to producers, Michael sat alone in a corner, methodically arranging and rearranging his costume jewelry with the focused intensity of someone trying to create order in a chaotic world. Little Emmanuel, who had wandered away from his mother during a break in his own taping, was mesmerized by the older boy's precision. Every sequin had to be perfect, every glove fold exactly right. But what struck Emmanuel most wasn't Michael's attention to detail. It was the sadness in his eyes, a melancholy that seemed impossibly deep for someone so young. "Hey there, little man," Michael said, noticing Emmanuel watching him. He forced a smile, but Emmanuel could see through it, even at 8 years old. "What's your name?" "Emmanuel," the shy boy whispered, clutching his mother's hand as she finally caught up with him. "That's a beautiful name," Michael said. And in that moment, Emmanuel saw something in Michael's eyes that he wouldn't fully understand until years later. A desperate longing for the innocence that fame was systematically destroying, piece by piece, day by day. Michael knelt down to Emmanuel's eye level, and for just a moment, the performer's mask slipped completely away. "Do you like being on TV?" Michael asked quietly. "Sometimes," Emmanuel answered honestly. "But sometimes I just want to go home and play with my toys." Michael's smile became genuine for the first time. "Me too," he whispered so softly that Emmanuel's mother couldn't hear. "Me too, little man." That brief exchange would mark the beginning of a friendship that would span nearly 4 decades and give Emmanuel a front-row seat to one of entertainment history's greatest tragedies. What Emmanuel witnessed over those years would haunt him forever, watching his friend transform from a joyful teenager who loved to laugh and play video games into a reclusive, tormented soul who couldn't trust anyone's motives and lived in constant fear of disappointing a world that demanded perfection. Their friendship deepened throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s. Michael, despite his grueling schedule, would often call Emmanuel just to talk about normal kid things: comic books, movies, anything except music or performing. These conversations became Michael's escape valve, his only connection to the childhood that was slipping away faster than he could hold on to it. Michael wasn't like other kids, even then, Emmanuel recalls, his voice heavy with emotion as he sits in his Atlanta home, surrounded by photographs that chronicle their unlikely friendship. While other teenagers were thinking about cars and dating, Michael was carrying the weight of his family's financial security and the expectations of millions of fans. But he never complained to anyone except me. To the world, he just smiled and kept performing. Emmanuel remembers the night in 1978 when Michael called him at 2 a.m., crying uncontrollably. The Jackson 5 had just finished a particularly grueling tour, and Michael had reached his breaking point. "I can't do this anymore, Emmanuel," Michael sobbed into the phone. "I'm so tired, but everyone keeps telling me I have to keep going. They say if I stop, everyone will forget about me. But I'm only 20 years old, and I feel like I've been working my whole life." Emmanuel, only 14 at the time, didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone whose pain comes from the very thing that makes them special? "What if we just ran away?" Emmanuel suggested innocently. "We could go somewhere where nobody knows who we are." Michael was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I dream about that every night, Emmanuel. But I can't. Too many people depend on me being Michael Jackson. I forgot how to be just Michael a long time ago." The success of Off the Wall in 1979 brought Michael critical acclaim, but it also intensified the pressure. Emmanuel watched his friend begin to change, not just physically but emotionally. The spontaneous laughter became rarer. The phone calls became more desperate. Michael started talking about feeling like he was living someone else's life. Then came Thriller in 1982, and everything changed forever. Emmanuel was one of the first people Michael called when Thriller hit #1. But instead of celebration, there was terror in Michael's voice. "They want more now," Michael said, his voice shaking. "It's not enough that I gave them the biggest album ever. They want me to do it again and again and again. What happens when I can't? What happens when I disappoint them?" The success of Thriller transformed Michael from a star into a phenomenon, but Emmanuel witnessed the devastating cost of that transformation. Michael began calling Emmanuel at all hours, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, but always searching for something he couldn't name, the person he used to be before the world claimed him. "The calls started getting really scary after Thriller," Emmanuel reveals. "Michael would call me at 2 or 3 in the morning, sobbing. He'd say things like, 'I don't know who I am anymore, Emmanuel. When I look in the mirror, I see this person everyone expects me to be, but I can't find the real me anywhere. It's like Michael died, and only Michael Jackson is left.'" But it was during the Christmas season of 1985 that Emmanuel witnessed something that would change his understanding of his friend forever. Michael had invited Emmanuel to spend Christmas at the Jackson family compound in Encino, desperate for some connection to normalcy during the holiday season. What should have been a joyful gathering turned into one of the most heartbreaking conversations of Emmanuel's life. They were sitting alone in Michael's bedroom at 3 a.m., surrounded by stuffed animals, comic books, and Disney memorabilia, the only remnants of the childhood Michael was desperately trying to reclaim. The contrast was heartbreaking, a grown man clinging to symbols of innocence while bearing the weight of global superstardom. Suddenly, without warning, Michael broke down crying. "Do you ever wish you could just disappear?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his hands shaking as he clutched a worn teddy bear. "What do you mean?" Emmanuel replied, though he was afraid of the answer. "I mean really disappear, become invisible, walk down the street without anyone knowing who I am, go to a store without bodyguards following me 10 feet behind. Have a conversation with someone who doesn't want anything from me, not money, not career opportunities, not even just the chance to say they met Michael Jackson." Michael's tears were flowing freely now, years of suppressed pain finally finding release. "I would give up everything, the money, the fame, the records, all of it, just to feel normal for one day, just to be nobody special for 24 hours. Emmanuel tried to comfort his friend, telling him that things would get better, that he could take a break from performing, that he didn't owe the world every piece of himself. But Michael just shook his head with the resignation of someone who had already accepted his fate. "You don't understand," Michael said, his voice taking on a hollow quality that Emmanuel had never heard before. "I created this monster called Michael Jackson, and now I have to feed it every day or it will destroy everyone around me. My family depends on me. My fans depend on me. The record company depends on me. Everyone depends on me being Michael Jackson 24 hours a day. But nobody cares about me being Michael. Nobody even remembers that person existed." Michael then said something that would haunt Emmanuel for decades. "Sometimes I think the real Michael died a long time ago, maybe when I was still a kid, and I've just been playing his ghost ever since." As the years passed, Emmanuel watched his friend's struggles intensify. The physical transformation that began in the mid-1980s worried Emmanuel deeply, not because of how Michael looked, but because of what it represented, a desperate attempt to escape from an identity that had become a prison. People made jokes about Michael's appearance, Emmanuel explains, his voice filled with pain. But they didn't understand what I understood. Michael wasn't trying to become white or trying to look like someone else. He was trying to disappear. He thought if he changed his face enough, maybe people would stop seeing Michael Jackson and start seeing just a person. He was trying to erase himself so he could find himself. The child molestation allegations in 1993 devastated Michael in ways that the public never understood. Emmanuel was one of the few people Michael called during those dark months, and what he heard broke his heart. He was completely broken, Emmanuel says, his voice cracking with emotion. Michael kept asking me, "Why do people want to hurt me? I've only tried to make them happy. I've given them everything I have. My childhood, my privacy, my peace of mind. Why isn't that enough? Why do they want to destroy me too?" Michael's voice during those calls was barely recognizable, hollow, defeated, like someone whose spirit had been systematically crushed. He told me he felt like a man being executed for the crime of being too successful. Emmanuel recalls, he couldn't understand how the world could turn on him so viciously when all he'd ever done was try to entertain them. The move to Neverland Ranch in the late 1980s was supposed to give Michael the sanctuary he desperately needed, but Emmanuel knew it had become something else entirely, a beautiful prison where Michael could hide from the world but never escape from himself. Neverland was Michael's attempt to create the childhood he never had, Emmanuel observes, but you can't go backward in life. The more he tried to recapture his lost innocence, the more he highlighted what fame had stolen from him. It became a monument to everything he'd lost, not a celebration of anything he'd gained. Emmanuel visited Neverland many times over the years, and each visit was more heartbreaking than the last. The ranch was filled with everything a child could want. But Michael wasn't a child. He was a 30, then 40, then 50-year-old man trying to live in a fantasy that couldn't heal the real wounds fame had inflicted. Michael would show me new additions to the ranch like a kid showing off toys, Emmanuel remembers. But there was always this sadness underneath. He knew it was all elaborate pretending, but pretending was all he had left. Reality was too painful. The most devastating conversation of their friendship occurred on Christmas Eve, 2008. Michael had called Emmanuel that morning, his voice more desperate than Emmanuel had ever heard it. He begged Emmanuel to come to Neverland, saying he had something important to tell him that couldn't wait. When Emmanuel arrived that evening, he found Michael sitting alone in what he called his memory room, a space few people ever saw, filled with childhood photographs, family mementos, and artifacts from happier times. Michael looked older than his 50 years, his face gaunt, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm tired, Emmanuel," Michael said, his voice barely audible. "I'm so tired that sleep doesn't help anymore. I'm tired of being Michael Jackson. I'm tired of pretending everything is okay when nothing has been okay for decades. I'm tired of carrying everyone else's dreams while my own dreams died before I was old enough to vote." Michael then revealed something that shocked Emmanuel to his core. He had been secretly planning to retire after the This Is It concerts in London. Not just take a break, but retire completely from public life and disappear forever. "I've been planning this for months," Michael confessed, pulling out a folder filled with research about small towns in different countries, places where he might be able to live anonymously. "I want to disappear completely. I want to go somewhere where nobody knows who Michael Jackson is. I want to sit in a coffee shop and read a newspaper without anyone taking my picture. I want to go to a park and feed the ducks without bodyguards. I want to have a conversation with someone who sees me as just another person, not as a commodity or an icon or a freak show." But then Michael said something that still haunts Emmanuel today. "But even if I could disappear completely tomorrow, I don't think I remember how to be just Michael anymore. I've been performing for so long, putting on this act 24 hours a day, that I don't know who I am when the music stops and the lights go down. I think the real Michael might have died somewhere along the way, and I'm just a ghost pretending to be alive." Emmanuel tried desperately to encourage his friend, telling him that retirement was possible, that he could find peace, that the real Michael was still in there somewhere, waiting to be rediscovered. But Michael's response was heartbreaking in its finality. "It's too late for me," Michael said, tears streaming down his face. "I've been Michael Jackson for so long that I can't remember how to be anything else. And the terrible truth is, even if I could remember, I don't think anyone would care about just Michael. Without the music and the dancing and the spectacle, I'm nobody. I've spent my entire life being what everyone else wanted me to be, and now I don't exist without their expectations. As 2009 progressed and the London concerts approached, Emmanuel noticed that Michael's calls were becoming more frequent and more desperate. Michael was terrified about the upcoming shows, not because he couldn't perform, his talent was as magnificent as ever, but because he didn't want to anymore. He told me the concerts felt like a death sentence, Emmanuel reveals. Michael said he felt like a trained animal being forced to perform tricks for an audience that would never be satisfied no matter how much he gave them. He said every time he stepped on stage now, he felt like he was dying a little more. Michael also confessed something during those final months that broke Emmanuel's heart. He had started forgetting how to be happy. "I know how to make other people happy," Michael told him during one late-night conversation. "I've been doing that my whole life, but I can't remember what it feels like to be happy myself. It's like that part of me died so long ago that I can't even remember what it was like to be alive in that way." Then came that final phone call on June 25th, 2009, the call that Emmanuel still relives every day. "Emmanuel," Michael's voice was barely recognizable, slurred from exhaustion and medication, hollow with defeat. "I need you to know something before I can't tell you anymore. You were the only person who ever saw me as just Michael, not as Michael Jackson. You were the only one who never wanted anything from me except friendship. Thank you for that gift. Thank you for letting me be human, even if it was only for a few minutes at a time." Emmanuel tried desperately to keep Michael talking, sensing that something was terribly wrong. The slurred words, the tone of finality, the way Michael was talking as if he was saying goodbye forever. "Michael, where are you? Let me come over. We can talk about this," Emmanuel pleaded. "It's okay," Michael whispered, his voice getting fainter. "I'm just so tired, Emmanuel. I'm tired of disappointing people by not being perfect. I'm tired of being everyone's dream and no one's reality. I can't carry this anymore. I can't be what everyone wants me to be when I don't even know who I am anymore." "Michael, please, just tell me where you are," Emmanuel begged. "I just wanted to say goodbye to the real me," Michael said, his voice barely audible now. "The Michael that only you remember, the one who wanted to run away and be nobody special. Tell people that he existed once, okay? Tell them he was real." The line went dead. Emmanuel immediately tried calling back, but there was no answer. He called Michael's security team, his managers, anyone who might know where Michael was, but it was too late. Hours later, Emmanuel learned from the news that Michael Jackson was gone. For 14 years, Emmanuel has carried the crushing weight of that final conversation. He's wondered countless times if he could have done more, said something different, somehow saved his friend from the prison that fame had built around him. The guilt has been almost unbearable. "I replay that conversation every day," Emmanuel admits, tears flowing freely. "I wonder if I should have called 911 immediately, if I should have driven to wherever he was, if there was something I could have said that would have made him hold on just a little longer." But what haunts Emmanuel most is the realization that Michael's death wasn't sudden. It was the inevitable conclusion of a lifetime spent sacrificing his authentic self for the happiness of others. Michael didn't die on June 25th, 2009, Emmanuel reflects. Michael died slowly over decades, every time he chose to be what others needed instead of who he was. People remember Michael as the king of pop, the greatest entertainer who ever lived, the man who broke down racial barriers and changed music forever. But Emmanuel remembers him as something else entirely. The sweetest, most sensitive person he'd ever known. A boy who just wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he could do. Michael had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the world when he was talking to you, Emmanuel says. He remembered everything about our conversations, asked about my family, cared about my problems. He was the most famous person on earth, but he was also the most genuinely caring person I ever met. Emmanuel's revelation reminds us that behind the glittering glove and the moonwalk was a human being who paid the ultimate price for our entertainment. Michael Jackson gave the world his childhood, his privacy, his mental health, his peace of mind, and ultimately his life, all in service of making others happy. The saddest part Emmanuel concludes, is that Michael had everything most people dream of: fame, fortune, talent that defied description. But all he wanted was what I had: the freedom to be nobody special, to make mistakes without the world watching, to be loved for who you are rather than what you can do. Today, Emmanuel Lewis lives quietly in Atlanta, working behind the cameras in television production and cherishing the ordinary life that his famous friend envied so deeply. He's never married, never had children, but he's never taken for granted the simple blessing of anonymity that Michael would have given everything to experience just once. He's also never forgotten the lessons he learned from watching Michael Jackson navigate the impossible pressures of superstardom. If this story teaches us anything, Emmanuel reflects, it should teach us to value the Michael in all of us, the person we are when nobody's watching, when we're not trying to impress anyone, when we're just being human. Emmanuel Lewis's 39-year silence has finally been broken, and with it comes a deeper understanding of what we lost when we lost Michael Jackson. Not just a performer, but a person who deserved the simple gift of being himself. The boy from Gary, Indiana, who just wanted to make people happy, ended up sacrificing everything that made him happy. And somewhere in that tragedy lies a lesson we all need to learn about the price of putting our heroes on pedestals so high that they can never climb down to be human again. Michael Jackson's final words to his childhood friend weren't about music or fame or legacy. They were about the universal human need to be seen, understood, and loved for who we truly are, not for what we can provide others. That's the Michael Jackson that Emmanuel Lewis will never forget, and now neither will we.